And it's not even properly winter yet, she reminded herself. She was able to crest a small hill, thick with pine trees, and secure herself some shelter from the worst of the wind. With teeth gritted, Aelis remained on her feet as she dug a fire pit and cleared it of needles. Setting the entire forest ablaze might slow down any oncoming dead, she murmured. But thinking like an invoker is not going to get me anywhere. When she had a small and properly contained fire lit, she dug out her lantern and anatomist bag and set them on her lap. Gingerly, she eased her right foot up into her lap and began probing the ankle. Not broken, she muttered. But it hurt, and it had stiffened, and it was going to hurt more after a few hours' rest. Nothing for it but a brace. Other options floated across the surface of her thoughts, half-formed. She shoved them away before they turned coherent. There wasn't time, not here. Not for alchemy, not for a serious crafting of a brace, not for any more significant necromantic interventions. She briefly wondered if she could enchant herself into simply not feeling the pain, but the anatomist in her knew that would lead to far worse damage in the long run. Pain was a warning, and a teacher. Aelis pulled some cloth strips and some pieces of flat, stiff steel from her travel medical case. With the cloth, she quickly bound the steel splints to either side of the sore parts of her ankle, her trained anatomist's fingers tying quick, secure knots. Then she wound more cloth around the initial strips, till her ankle was tightly bound and the steel pressed cold against her skin through her stockings. It'll do. Aelis dug deep into whatever reserves of energy she had left for one final ward. Bayard's wakefulness. She was only able to extend it in a ring that barely went beyond herself and her fire. But if anything larger than a small dog crossed the space as she slept, it would wake her. A bear would probably have the time to eat me before I woke, she thought. But before she could summon the will to argue with herself, she had already drifted off. Aelis's dreams were troubled. There were skeletons with points of all too bright fire in their eyes, wielding swords that hadn't rusted away. There was Morenia fighting them with her, until the half-elf's own enormous green eyes had turned to ice-blue flame, and the flesh over her cheeks sloughed away. There were other animated corpses, driven by more than magical power, but by some inner force, like the one Aelis had put down at her necromancer's test. She imagined she saw Archmagister Duvhalin looming over the shapeless battlefield, as if she were a game piece and he the player. There were others in the battle, if that is what it was. The Dobruge brothers, Otto, Elmo, even Pips. It wasn't quite a nightmare. Aelis had never been given to those. Even in her dreams, her power exerted control over her surroundings. But this treaded close. Aelis woke startled. She had felt nothing and seen nothing to indicate that her wakefulness had tripped. The sky was lightening, but only just. With half a mind to look around her camp for tracks, animal or otherwise, she levered herself to her feet. Then Aelis imagined Tun's disapproving glare, as if she voiced such a thought. As if I'd know what to look for anyway, she muttered, as she gathered her gear and shoveled dirt over her already dead fire. When it came to the heavens, however, she did know. The sun wasn't visible over the tree line, but the green moon was a sliver high in the sky. Still probably an hour till dawn, she thought. Nothing for it but to get walking. The next 3 days were much the same, only colder. Though Aelis already wore the heaviest garment she had, and had slipped on what extra she had packed, she wished she had at least one more coat or another scarf to wrap over her ears and head, or a horn of fire, or a brick set before a fire wrapped in a blanket and slipped into her pocket. "Wish in one hand, shit in the other." Warden Jacques' voice sounded in her head. "And a handful of shit is the last thing I..."